For a couple of weeks now, I've wanted to do a review on this movie called Reminiscence, starring Hugh Jackman and Rebecca Ferguson. And to be honest, I want to focus on the end of the movie, so needless to say, major spoilers. So as a matter of background, the film is sort of a sci-fi slash neo-noir film, which is basically to say that there's certainly sci-fi elements, but at the same time, there's also kind of film noir elements with a sort of a modern twist. So there's elements of mystery, intrigue, moral ambiguity, but at the same time, instead of being set predominantly in the shadows and in darkness, as you would typically find in the film noir genre, it's set mainly in the daytime, which is kind of unusual. Anyway, so the main character in the film is this guy named Nick, played by Hugh Jackman, who has a really kind of unusual business. So Nick has this business whereby he can basically hook people up to a machine. So they're put in sort of this kind of coffin of water, if you will. Something's hooked up to their heads. And basically through the use of computer and advanced technology, their memories can be projected in holographic form. So in terms of the people living out their memories, that they're laying in this pool of water, recalling the memories in their own heads. But at the same time, Hugh Jackman and his staff member can kind of look at the memories being played out in real time in a certain sense, again in holographic form. So early on in the film, this sultry lounge singer named May, played by Rebecca Ferguson, enters into Nick's place of business, and she basically asks him for his help to use his special machine to essentially help her find her keys, which of course he does. But then, of course, as you might expect, shortly after this business transaction, Nick hooks up with May. They begin a romantic relationship, and he quickly falls in love with her. But then, almost as quickly, she disappears without a trace, without any sort of prior explanation. And so, the bulk of the movie involves Nick trying to solve this mystery, like what happened to this figure known as May. And over the course of trying to unravel kind of what happened to this person that he loves, basically, he discovers all sorts of dark and nefarious things. Anyways, at the climax of the film, Nick captures one of the main antagonists of the movie, this corrupt cop, and hooks him up to his machine. So he's looking through this cop's memories to kind of see what happened to May. And he kind of stumbles upon this conversation that the cop had with May before her sort of untimely demise. So basically what Nick finds out is that May was a really serious hardcore drug addict, as a result of which she got involved in this con cooked up by this cop to basically deceive Nick. So basically the whole idea is that she would seduce him, begin a romantic relationship with him, gain his trust, and thereby gain access to his business. And so ultimately what she was looking for, basically what the cop was looking for, I guess, was a certain amount of information to kind of feed into this larger plot whereby they would basically try to kill the mistress of this high-profile figure and her son. So basically that was kind of the main goal, if you will, of this cop in terms of the larger plot of the movie. But then what ends up happening, and again, Nick sees this through the memories of this corrupt cop, is that May sort of has this redemption moment where she kind of comes to her senses. And so even though she was truly involved in this con, she takes steps to basically save the kid, right? So she couldn't help, in a certain sense, the murder of the mistress, but she manages to save her son and hide him in a remote location. And tragically, to avoid revealing the location of this person through the use of drugs or narcotics or sort of a truth serum, if you will, she basically decides to kill herself. And so, again, she kind of meets an untimely demise. So basically, by the end of the movie, Hugh Jackman's character is so despondent, so sad, so distraught, that he basically hooks himself up to his own machine and lives out the rest of his days reliving the memories of his past relationship with May, even though in reality he's in this pool of water just kind of getting old. Now, obviously, at this point, I could make all sorts of comments, I guess, about the dangers of living in a virtual world and escaping the pain of the present moment. But I kind of wanted to focus on something else, right? So basically, again, when Nick is examining the memories of this corrupt cop and kind of seeing the last moments of May's life, May kind of talks to him through the memories of this cop, like knowing that Nick would eventually find this cop and hook him up to his machine. And so basically what she says is that, she wanted to reveal to Nick, the truth about her condition, the truth of her kind of moral character and all that stuff. But she was afraid, right? Because she really loved this idea of Nick looking at her with love. And her fear was that if she revealed to him the darkness of her soul, drug addiction, the con, like whatever the case may be, he would look at her differently. He would perhaps look at her with anger, judgment, and condemnation. And in her mind, she just couldn't bear the possibility of that actually happening. So basically, before she kills herself, she tells Nick through this cop's memories that for a moment there, she believed in the reality of love. She believed in the reality of Nick's love, to love her unconditionally, if you will. But she didn't believe it enough. Like, she trusted it a little bit, but not really. And so that's what kind of led, in a certain sense, to her kind of ending her life. And, to be honest, when I saw that particular part of the movie, it really struck me deeply, because I thought to myself at the time, like, that's a really common struggle on the part of many people throughout the world. This notion of struggling to believe that I can be seen and known and loved. And so, to use an example, I remember back in the day when I was still at St. Augustine Seminary in Scarborough, Ontario, studying to be a priest for the Archdiocese of Toronto, talking to my spiritual director about first dates. And I don't know what the context was, but I do remember bringing up this example with him. And basically, my point in talking to him was that there's a certain comfort level in kind of being on a first date, because all your jokes are funny and all your stories are fresh, right? And so the idea was that as we continue to progress in the dating relationship, second date, third date, fourth date, and whatnot, it's kind of scary because there's an element of risk. Because after a while, like the person sees like the true self, the broken self, and like, will that person still accept me and dare we say love me, despite seeing me in all my incompleteness or brokenness, however you want to put it. But I remember in response, my director saying to me that even though I sympathize with your concern about fear of being seen and whatnot, you have to appreciate that the 12th date fundamentally, by its very nature, has to be better than the first date. Because even though there is, the elements of fear and risk and whatnot, if you allow yourself to be seen, then in a certain sense, you allow yourself the possibility of actually being loved. Because if people don't really see you or know you, then how can you trust that they actually love you? I mean, all of that's kind of wrapped into one, right? To be seen, to be known, and then to be loved. So to use a biblical example, think about the relationship between Jesus and St. Peter. So contrast Jesus and St. Peter at the Last Supper versus Jesus and St. Peter after the resurrection. So basically at the Last Supper, Peter is boasting before the Lord and all his brethren in a certain sense that he will never deny the Lord, even if all these jokers do. But then, of course, what happens is that on Good Friday, he denies the Lord 3 times, the last time to a mere servant girl. And the Lord looks at him, right? Not so much with judgment, but with a sense of understanding. Like, I see you, I know you, I love you even in this moment. And this particular dynamic, of course, comes to a head in the aftermath again of the resurrection. So Peter is talking to Jesus, and the Lord asks him a question. Simon Peter, do you love me? Of course, Peter is very cognizant of the fact that just very recently he's denied the Lord 3 times, right? He obviously has a clear memory of that. And at the very end, if you kind of break it down in terms of like, the English and the Greek, he says, well, Lord, I thought I loved you like, this much, but in reality I loved you that much. So, Lord, you know all things. You know I only love you with a kind of petty friendship love, even though I thought I loved you with perfect agape, godlike love. But then, of course, to Peter's surprise, instead of taking away from him the mantle of responsibility of being the first pope, Jesus actually confirms him in the mission, telling him to go forth and feed his sheep. And the thing I want you to notice here is that all of us have this temptation recurringly to kind of want to be like St. Peter at the Last Supper, where we say to ourselves, well, of course God loves me. Of course God accepts me and sends me forth on mission because I'm a good person. I'm a person of virtue. I'm a person without flaw. But it's only when we realize, in the mode of St. Peter again, that we are broken vessels, sinners who have been redeemed by the gratuitous grace of God's love, that we are prepared actually to become the persons that God wants us to be, right? And it is only then, again, that Christ sends us forth on mission. And why? Because in the absence of clarity about the point that truly who I am is a sinner who has been looked upon by the Lord, in the words of Pope Francis, what's the content of my message? The Lord has come to save other people, but not me. Well, no, that can't be the message. It has to be intensely personal. Go forth and love others as God has loved you. Forgive others as God has forgiven you. It's very much the very kind of baseline definition of evangelization. A hungry person telling another hungry person where to find a piece of bread. And again, in the absence of a personal connection to the message of evangelization, your proclamation will necessarily ring hollow, because at the end of the day, it'll lack a personal connection. And that, my friends, makes all the difference in the world. But on a more fundamental level, the stuff we're talking about today has profound implications for our own kind of personal relationship with God. Because again, if I'm unwilling to come before the Lord with great humility, revealing to him the great extent of my sinfulness, my brokenness, my wretchedness, if you will, I can't get to the point where I become fully convicted of the reality of his unconditional love. So given all that, perhaps as sort of a concrete takeaway message, perhaps I'm going to suggest that the next time you go before the Lord in prayer, Ask yourself, like, what is it that I am afraid to reveal to the Lord about myself that perhaps I haven't even admitted to my own self? Like, what are the dark places in your heart where you think to yourself, well, if I reveal to the Lord these shameful parts of my life, for sure he will reject me. And when you do that, do it with great courage, obviously, but also do it with a great sense of trust. And you have to do it, right? You have to go through the experience of showing to the Lord, again, the depths of your wretchedness and seeing how he accepts you and loves you in spite of that revelation. Even though it might be scary, this experience of receiving God's unconditional love in this moment of vulnerability will give you, in fact, tremendous courage and tremendous strength to live this life without fear and to proclaim the good news of the gospel. And may God bless you all.